WBC belt that has included Ali, the greatest of all time. They are set and ready to answer who's the greatest of right now. Wilder, Fury 2, here we go.
Okay, we'll start with this. Well, it is official. Kathy Gutierrez will finally get her chance in front of German Tina Rupprecht for the WBC title and International Boxing Organization, IBO, championships in the 105-pound division. The Mocatin earned her place as WBC mandatory challenger, being the number one contender ranking after winning the silver title against Joana Pastrana in Spain in November of 2019. This will be Kathy's chance to return to the table of world champions, as in 2011, she earned the International Boxing Federation, the IBF, belt against North American Holly Dunaway. The fight against Rupprecht, which will take place in Germany, which remains to be defined between Berlin or Hamburg by the end of April or early May, seeking to be able to count by a percentage of fans in the sand. Tina has defended her belt 4 times, the latest in December 2019 against Catalina Diaz, whom she defeated by unanimous decision after 10 rounds. That being said, this means essentially 3 things. 1, the obvious, that both Yokasta Valle and Tina Rupprecht, the IBF and WBC minimum weight champions, aren't going to be fighting each other because they're going to be satisfying their obligations as champions by way of their mandatory challengers. We talked about Yokasta Valle.
We did.
And it appears that Tina, Tiny Tina, finds herself in a similar predicament.
They were supposed to be fighting each other.
Things just didn't materialize. Extenuating circumstances. These are extraordinary times. That being said, what we know, at minimum what we know, is that the unification match between Tina and Yokasta won't take place from here till either April or May, because in April or May, Tina is supposed to be defending her title against her mandatory challenger.
So the unification match definitely ain't next.
At minimum, that's what we know. Furthermore, the inference we can make is that if these 2 world champions are going to unify with each other in a rematch, it would have to be much later on in the year.
That's one.
What this also communicates, what this also effectively does, is take Tina Rupprecht, the WBC minimum weight champion, out of the running for a Seniesa Estrada fight. That's right. Those of you might recall that a couple of days ago, we talked about how Tina Rupprecht, her name was in the hat for a potential Seniesa Estrada fight. Well, if Tina's going to be satisfying her mandatory in her very next fight, she won't be fighting Seniesa Estrada, as a Seniesa Estrada fight would be a voluntary title defense, whereas this is a mandatory title defense. One trumps the other. It's all in the name. Mandatory, as in mandated, as in you have to fight this fighter.
You're going to have to cough up that belt.
And it doesn't look like Tiny Tina is going to let that happen. She's not going to give up that green belt without a fight. That being said, that narrows down the pool of options for Seniesa Estrada, who's looking for a dance partner.
One more capable than Miranda Atkins.
Who Seniesa Estrada faced a lot of criticism for facing from very short-sighted critics who either didn't realize or didn't care that Miranda was a short-notice opponent. That wasn't who Seniesa was supposed to be fighting. She was supposed to be fighting Jackie Calvo, but Jackie dropped out. Miranda stepped in. The rest is history. And you see what's going on now for Seniesa.
You see it.
Yesenia Gomez turned down the fight. Tina Rupprecht is preoccupied. Reports seem to indicate that Itsuko Tada, who was also named as a potential opponent option, she's preoccupied as well.
So who's Seniesa supposed to fight?
Annabella Ortiz got COVID.
That takes her out of the running.
The last available name on Seniesa Estrada's hit list that was given to me by Joe Cool Estrada, Senesia's father, is the name of Tenkai Tsunami.
Who knows if she's available?
Who knows what her situation is, as everything seems to be an evolving situation during this global pandemic. I really want to see Seniesa Estrada get out there, and not just get out there, but get out there against someone who can fight back, someone who's capable. I don't blame Seniesa for that entire Miranda Atkins fiasco. That has a lot more to do with a scarcity of available opponents
on short notice during a pandemic.
And it doesn't really help that Seniesa Estrada is one of the most dangerous unbeaten contenders out there. I reiterate, I give Seniesa very good odds to lift a title from almost anybody at or around these weights.
I don't really know who she's going to end up fighting.
But I hope in the near future she can land herself a dance partner, as Tina Rupprecht is busy, Yokastavalle is busy, Etsuko Tada is busy, Yesenia Gomez, she doesn't seem to want any problems.
Annabelle Ortiz has got COVID.
Well, Seniesa needs someone to punch. Let's hope that she can find someone who's willing, someone who's able, somebody who can make a fight out of it. In heavyweight news, per tweet from Michael Benson, Eddie Hearn has told the media they're currently talking through the broadcaster situation for Anthony Joshua versus Tyson Fury. AJ fights on Sky in the UK and DAZN in USA, while Fury fights on BT in the UK and ESPN in the USA. Hearn does not believe it will be difficult to resolve, and all four can be involved. And the reason for this is because of how much money is in the pot for this fight. There are those out there who want to downplay the overall value of this match. But this is a match that, according to Bob Arum, just the fighters, just the two guys that are going to be fighting, this is a fight where both of those guys stand to make close to $100 million, if not $100 million, apiece. For context, for a perspective, do realize that even the most generous estimates for Wilder versus Fury 2, what that brought in on pay-per-view, an estimated 800,000 pay-per-view buys.
Or 850.
That comes out to roughly $63 million. If you went as far as tacking on the $16 million generated at the gate, that would come out to roughly $79.2 million, which is still less than what just one of these guys stand to walk away with from this fight.
This is the biggest fight out there.
No other fight like this fight
Zero.
stands to generate as much revenue, stands to pay out as much to the fighters, to the involved parties. And that's why Eddie Hearn feels that, the broadcasting situation should be easy to reconcile. Though I do find myself scratching my head a bit. You got two broadcasters, two transatlantic broadcasters apiece on either side of the Atlantic Ocean. And it is a practicality, after all. Is Sky going to show the fight and BT Sport at the same time?
DAZN and ESPN?
Simultaneously? I've no doubts that in the United Kingdom, the fight will be billed as a pay-per-view, but how's it supposed to break down? Are they going to both show it at the same time? Or is it that one of the networks, one of the broadcasters will show the fight live, and the other will air the replay? And does it break down the same way in the United States? Will DAZN show the fight live and ESPN air the replay?
Quite possibly.
It's funny. I passed by an article where Floyd Mayweather Jr. described the potential Gervonta Davis versus Ryan Garcia fight as the biggest fight in boxing. And I thought to myself, as I pissed myself laughing, are either Gervonta Davis or Ryan Garcia going to walk away with a cool $100 million from that fight? $100 million apiece. $100 million to both fighters. Is that where that little old fight with those little old lightweights is?
No.
Gervonta Davis, in his pay-per-view debut, he couldn't even crack 300,000 buys with his little old fight, but you think that fight is the biggest fight in boxing? Let's not kid ourselves.
This is it.
There is a rather infantile sentiment expressed in some small circles, very small circles, that because the fight isn't happening here stateside, because it's not happening in America and it doesn't involve any American fighters, that somehow it's not as big a fight as it is when no fight happening on American soil involving American fighters or otherwise
Is going to pay out like this is paying out.
I think that sentiment comes from those experiencing an inferiority complex. They need to feel that they themselves and where they are from is the proverbial center of the universe.
Trying to compensate.
Overcompensate for what has become of the American boxing scene, what used to be the mecca of boxing.
For a time it was.
Well, boxing in America just isn't what it used to be. Times have changed, and I'm not the least bit mad about it. I'll admit that the American boxing scene needs serious reform for things to go back to being the way that they were, for the sport to be at the forefront of the sporting world in this country. But the fact of the matter is, this is a bigger fight than anything else out there. And no, it doesn't involve any Americans.
Though one did have the chance.
The one who passed on it, the one who squandered that opportunity several times over the last couple of years, the one who Bob Arum and Eddie Hearn have both said... Deontay Wilder, whose mediation arbitration over his rematch clause is over financial compensation, not to force a third fight with Tyson Fury.
Wait, so he's cashing out?
This is a rather intriguing revelation that's being confirmed on both sides by Eddie Hearn and by Bob Arum, that Deontay Wilder is using this mediation arbitration, this dispute resolution clause, to seek financial compensation. And it's intriguing because, according to Bob Arum, the reason that Tyson Fury isn't legally bound to giving Deontay Wilder a third fight is because the contract expired as a result of COVID-19 shutting everything down.
It had reached its term limit.
But if the contract did expire the way that Bob Arum says it expired, and Tyson Fury isn't legally bound to giving Deontay Wilder a third fight, then why is he being financially compensated? We know that Bob Arum certainly ain't in the business of giving money away.
He can't be doing this out of the kindness of his heart.
Don't be naive. If any kind of dollar amount, big or small, is being paid out to Deontay Wilder, it has to be paid out to him for a reason, and the story is, it's compensation. Financial compensation. But financial compensation for what? According to you, the contract expired and Tyson Fury ain't gotta fight him. The usual suspects, at least one of them, reported by way of their YouTube channel, Blue Balls Sports, that Deontay Wilder was supposed to receive a care package for the sum total of $32 million. Even in light of these comments from Eddie Hearn, from Bob Arum, confirmation that Deontay Wilder is set to receive some kind of financial compensation, I still find it hard to believe that that compensation is anything to the tune of $32 million. You don't just give away $32 million.
No fucking way.
So how do you reconcile it? How do you make it make sense?
I says, let me just make some phone calls. So I called Top Rank and they hadn't heard it. And I said, let me call PBC. Let me call someone at PBC. And they was like, man, PBC said, if they giving Deontay Wilder $32 million, I can guarantee you I'm gonna sign his name for him. You know what I'm saying? $32 million is a lot of money. And then it was like, Fred, who has $32 million now in this climate? No one has $32 million in this climate, because if they had $32 million to give away, they would do the fight. And how that makes sense to me is no fight right now is going to do $32 million. I'm thinking in America. I don't know what that British market is saying. I don't know what them kings and queens are doing in those parliamentaries and those sovereign nations and all. So I can't speak on that, But in America, I don't know a $32 million fight. I'm like, $32 million. That shit don't make sense to me. No fight is worth $500 million. The only way you can give away $32 million is if the fight is going to be a $500 million fight. You understand what I'm saying? $400 million. But I mean, and that's 10% of the gross profits, $32 million, right? So
reconciliation is required because it does appear like Deontay Wilder has been given something, but nothing to the tune of $32 million. It's just not economically viable. It doesn't make sense.
Top Rank ain't gonna give away that kind of money.
And I know what you might be thinking to yourself. You might be thinking to yourself, well, weren't you just talking about how much money is in the pot for the Anthony Joshua Tyson Fury fight? Who's to say that they didn't move some money around, and perhaps that's the $32 million everybody's talking about?
That's not likely.
That money that's in the pot for that fight is specific to it. It's not coming from Top Rank.
It's not their money.
It's not Top Rank's scratch. And it is Top Rank that would presumably be paying Deontay Wilder whatever it is he's being paid.
His compensation package.
But I don't think that package sums up to $32 million. That just doesn't make sense. If they had that much to give away, they'd just stage the goddamn fight. I'll tell you what I think. I can entertain Deontay Wilder being given something. Nothing to the tune of $32 million, but
A few mil.
nominal amount of money. Maybe 2, 3, 4 million, something like that.
Possible.
At least more possible than $32 million. But why he's being given anything at all still requires some reconciliation, as according to Bob Arum, the reason Tyson Fury was able to move on, the reason he wasn't legally bound to Deontay Wilder to give him a third fight, is because the contract expired. But if it expired, then why are you compensating this guy? What are you compensating him for?
Does it even matter at this point?
From the moment that Tyson Fury indicated that he was ready to go on, with or without Deontay Wilder, late last year, I was convinced that the fight got away from Deontay Wilder. That he'd never get another chance to lock horns with the Gypsy King again. And a few particulars aside, it does seem like I was right about that, because you've got to put your thinking cap on for this one. whether Tyson Fury beats Anthony Joshua in their first fight and their potential second fight, or he loses to Anthony Joshua. One way or another, it's not likely that Tyson Fury sticks around.
Nope.
In victory or defeat.
Nope.
You see what kind of money they're talking about paying these guys? Do you think Tyson Fury is going to want to be bothered with Deontay Wilder after collecting those paydays, those purse amounts?
That money will have him set for life.
The inference we can make here is that it's not likely that Tyson Fury fights Deontay Wilder for a third time in the near future, if at all. And what this development...
What it communicates.
is that Deontay Wilder cashed out, that he wanted the cash more than he wanted the clash, that contrary to the popular narrative...
The one where Wilder's this fucking warrior that wants revenge.
It seems that what he really wanted was revenue more than revenge, more than reciprocity, that he wanted money more than another melee, more than mayhem.
That's what this was all about?
I asked several times here on the channel that if Deontay Wilder in his heart of hearts feels that Tyson Fury cheated, that foul play was at work, and not just the first fight, but the second fight as well, if that's the case, then why would you want to lock horns with that guy for a third time? And
I'd get the odd comment here and there.
from enthusiastic and disgruntled Deontay Wilder fanboys who would tell me that the reason he's willing to do that, even under those circumstances, is because he wants vengeance. Well, how do you like them apples? What Wilder wanted more than anything was revenue, as opposed to revenge. I mean, that's what this communicates.
He cashed out.
And it's confirmed on both sides.
I don't know that he had much of a choice.
Part of me feels like he didn't. A part of me feels like this was likely his only option. I think it's fortunate that he's not walking away empty-handed, but better still, part of me does feel that this is a situation where, his hands were kind of tied. I just never got the impression that he could actually impose that third fight on Tyson Fury, that he could force it. And here today, after all the smoke is settled and everything is all said and done,
He wasn't pushing for a third fight?
this dispute resolution clause, this mediation arbitration was all about giving Deontay Wilder a going-away present? A parting gift? A memento? I'll tell you what. There are certain particulars in association with this entire development, this entire fiasco, that me and you are never gonna know, Certain elements of this story will remain in a gray area, but at minimum, what we can see, at least what I've been convinced of this whole time, is that Deontay Wilder won't be fighting Tyson Fury for a third time. There won't be another fight.
And that much I thought already.
That much I was already convinced of. As soon as Tyson Fury started talking about bailing, that's when I was convinced he actually had an avenue to do so. That if the guy really were legally bound to fighting Deontay Wilder for a third time, he wouldn't be talking like that.
So where Deontay Wilder goes from here?
Who knows? But he won't be fighting Fury again, that's for sure.